This is the story of the highly decorated Obersturmführer Friedrich Hahl. His comrades also called him the Little King. He tells of a life that was shaped by discipline in the military from a very young age. He tells of his training with the Waffen SS, the cruel war in Russia, and his escape from captivity. Listen to the unvarnished truth of a German soldier of the Waffen SS.
Jetzt kommt wieder eine Geschichte, die ist fast nicht glaubhaft. Die Bahnlinie führte unmittelbar an meinem Elternhaus vorbei. Das heißt, es waren von meiner Wohnung.
We were then transported by train to Upper Silesia. On the way, something unbelievable happened. The train line passed right by our house in Obertürkheim, and the train stopped right in front of our house. So I was able to quickly jump off the train and say goodbye to my mother and sister. Then we were transported to Upper Silesia. There we were, housed in barracks. The people who lived there were not friendly to us. This was new for us. Before, people always brought us food and greeted us kindly, but these people were almost evil. There we were given vehicles. 2 groups of 12 men each were given an Opel Blitz. Then we trained for a few days for the battle. The leaders gave us a hard time again. Then we went to the forests of Lublin. At that time we still believed that we would march through the Ukraine to Iraq to drive out the British. But it turned out differently. When we were in position in the forest, we were informed about the Russian uniforms and insignia. The first Russian word we learned was hands up. At that point we knew where the trip was going. Then came June 22nd, and the first battles against Russia began. We were still stationed in Lublin. At that time I wrote impatiently to my mother. The war against Russia has started, and we are sitting here and cannot intervene. We want to go to the enemy. On June 30th we finally left, all aboard. We're going to the front. During the night we drove to the Polish border. We heard that it wasn't easy for the units at the front to take the Russian fortifications, but we couldn't wait to fight. On the 1st of July we finally left. We went to the front line. After a few kilometers we had to dismount and dig trenches and load anti-tank ammunition for our guns. We thought, this can't end well. A Russian tank attack and we have no tanks of our own. But thank God, no Russian tanks came. So we remounted our vehicles and moved on. After a few more kilometers we had to dismount again and prepare for battle. We positioned ourselves on a hill, with the vehicles a few hundred meters behind us for cover. We could see 200 meters into the valley. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a whole Soviet division attacked us. They wanted to secure our advance road as a retreat road. We did not allow that. Our battalion, armed only with machine guns and grenade launchers, repulsed the attack without any casualties. The battle lasted from 1400 to 1800. We didn't let the enemy enter the road. It was very difficult for the Russians. For us it was too easy. It was so easy that we thought that war can't be that easy. After the battle was over and the Russians had retreated, our regimental commander Beckel drove across the battlefield to see for himself the effect of our weapons and tactics. He was shot in the head by a hidden Russian sniper. The first dead in our regiment was the regimental commander. This was very bitter for us. We all liked him very much. But this is war, and war requires sacrifices. Later we reloaded ammunition and remounted our vehicles. We headed east for about 30 kilometers, get out of the vehicles and prepare for battle. As we walked along a hollow path we came under heavy fire from Siberian snipers. My machine gunner 1 had just started firing when he was shot in the head. My gunner 3 was also shot in the head. Gunner 4 was wounded. The squad leader was badly wounded. Good old Merck, who had encouraged me so much as a recruit, was also killed. We were under the command of 3rd Company, and 3rd Company had only head and stomach shots. I was fine, as always. We lost about 30% of our men in those battles. This was in Husiatun. Our battalion commander, Baron von Hagen, collected money to erect a monument to the fallen comrades there. We should have erected at least 50 more monuments in the course of the war, but we didn't know that at the time. It went on. Mount up for battle. To fight, kill, die, mount again and ride on, dismount for battle and on and on. It was fast. There was hardly time to breathe. Soldiers forget quickly. No, they don't forget. But they hide what they have seen and experienced. We must win the war and defeat the enemy. We have to fight now. We can mourn tomorrow. We continued to advance and had fierce skirmishes. Then, just before Dnipropetrovsk, we came to a railroad. Along the railroad tracks were huge wheat fields that had just been harvested. There we came under heavy Russian fire. We took cover as best we could, but that's where our Hauptsturmführer Schade was killed. The next day the Russians were suddenly gone. We then took the city of Dnipropetrovsk without further resistance. As we walked through the city, I saw a Russian bank, and I and some comrades went in. The safes were open and the rooms were filled with knee-deep Russian rubles. Just for fun, we each took a note. Then we marched to the Dnieper River, where I took up a position with my machine gun unit. We came under artillery fire again, including a direct hit on our position, but miraculously no one was seriously injured. As a soldier, you get paid every 10 days. The next time we got our pay, we had to laugh. We were paid in rubles at a rate of 10 to 1, so 1 Reichsmark was worth 10 rubles, so the following troops could fill their pockets with Russian rubles. But wealth doesn't count for us. We were able to rest for a few days outside of Dnipropetrovsk. During this time, excellent Italian engineers built a bridge over the river under constant fire. Not far from Dnipropetrovsk was a training center for artillerymen who had measured every meter and could fire very accurately. We crossed the bridge at night. We had no casualties, but a friend I had known since the Hitler Youth was killed there. He was a Gradmelder. The bridge was shattered by an artillery shell in front of him, and he fell into the river with his motorcycle. The next day we received the order to extend the bridgehead, i.e. to secure the area in order to strengthen the lines and ensure the supply. At 10 o'clock in the morning, we received such heavy artillery fire on our positions that our General Joseph Steiner called off the attack. Under this heavy fire, the division would have been destroyed, but the next day we were able to attack successfully and extend and secure the front line. There we saw for the first time how well the Russian soldiers built their cover, so I must say that the Russians were far superior to us in camouflage and building cover. Meanwhile, a task force of ours had moved south and was able to cross the river without enemy contact. To the Russians' surprise, we attacked from below and relieved the pressure on the front there. The Russians then continued to retreat. Meanwhile, it was fall and the nights were noticeably colder. Our division's preliminary objective was the town of Shakhty, and we were now able to reach it. By November we had advanced so far that we could see the steeples of Shakhty. Then all hell broke loose. For the first time we experienced an attack by the so-called Stalin organs, and we were right in the middle of it. There was almost panic among the troops because it was unknown. These rockets came at us with an unbelievably shrill sound, and the projectiles were also large, about 40 centimeters long. But when they exploded, they had large shrapnel, which was not as dangerous as grenades with small shrapnel. But if you were hit by one of those shrapnel, of course it was over, but we survived the attack quite well. Now we knew that there was an organ of Stalin. After 2 days, the advance continued. It was getting colder and colder. The Russians who attacked us were well equipped. Fur hats, fur coats, felt boots and rifles that shot well even in the cold. We still had summer clothes, and our boots, which we soldiers called Nobelbecker, were nailed, and you can imagine that the cold made the metal nails very hard. We were not equipped for the cold. We provided ourselves with as much warm clothing as possible. Because of the attack, I and my men were ordered to leave my company and reinforce the other company. We left during the night. In a large field we came across a Wehrmacht anti-aircraft gun, camouflaged under a large pile of straw. We decided to move on in the early morning hours and lay down in a large pile of straw nearby. What could happen with a guarded anti-aircraft gun nearby? So we slept. When a frontline soldier has a chance to sleep, he sleeps soundly. When we emerged from the straw in the early morning, the anti-aircraft gun was no longer there, and we saw with horror a Russian company approaching us. We didn't want to get into a fight, so we retreated in an orderly fashion. Strangely, the Russians didn't attack us. They must have seen us, but they were probably happy that we left them alone. Then a German reconnaissance unit arrived with orders to look for us. When we got back to our company, we could hardly believe it, but we had orders to retreat. For us, it was always forward, always attack, and now retreat. It was not easy for us. But the Russians were too many. It's unbelievable how many people the Russians had at their disposal. We had to retreat further and regrouped at the Mius position. I was there again 10 years ago. Today there is a small stream there, but back then it was a good defensive position. We set up defensive positions there. Our regiment had 3 battalions. 2 battalions had to defend the Mius position, and 1 battalion could rest about 30 kilometers behind the front. It was always changing. That's how the position was held. It was nice when it was our turn, and we could lick our wounds for a few days, repair our weapons and mend our uniforms. There were also some fried potato relationships with Ukrainian women. Then there was a very hard winter with -25 degrees, and we were back at the front. My group and I were stationed in a bombed-out kolkhoz. We had small bunkers, but they couldn't be heated. At night we had to relieve the guard after an hour because his mouth and nose were frozen. It was freezing cold, and we still had no winter clothes. Our general, Felix Steiner, went from barracks to barracks every night in the freezing cold to personally inquire how we were doing. It was a difficult time. I will never forget the first warm rays of sunshine in March. It was wonderful. Meanwhile, there were also better bunkers, and from April, the Russian attacks became less. The Russians shifted their attacks to the south. The SS Division Germania had heavy fighting there, and my future commander August Diekmann was fighting there. He was a mad dog, charging ahead of his men, blade unsheathed, into the Russians, just like in the 30 Years' War. It's a miracle he survived so long. On May 1st, I was unexpectedly called to report to my battalion commander. The dear Baron von Hagen asked me if I wanted to go to the Junker School. He saw leadership qualities in me and wanted to encourage them. I said a clear and decisive yes. There were 5 of us who were going to Berlin to attend the leadership school, so we went back to the command post and from there back to our home base. There we were met by Obersturmbannführer Geisler. Since we had come from the front, we were all wearing our camouflage jackets. He ordered us to take them off. There were 2 junior officers who had not yet been decorated. They were allowed to put their camouflage jackets back on and go back to the front. He told them that, as a leader, you have to prove yourself as a soldier. Come back when you have earned your decorations. I already had the Iron Cross 2nd class, etc.